the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of Equatorial Guinea, the final selections. Here we go. Hello, we are back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. The final roster is released and we are looking at Equatorial Guinea's selections. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. That was based mostly on their participation over the past 2 years, but we did consider a few other factors as well. Today we review that list now that the final squad has been announced. We promised to point out any surprises at the end of part 1, any notable non-selections, surprise inclusions, and new players. And we also said we would cover any injuries. We will do all of those things as we go through the list again. And we also released a spotlight review, a not so serious predictions of the starters. We released that as a short. So we'll review that list at the end here. Let's jump right in. We begin with a bit of team information here. The squad is 27 players. That was a decision made in mid-December to increase it from 23 to 27. And around December 20th or so, Equatorial Guinea released a 50-man preliminary squad. So they had to cut 23 to create the final squad. 10 of those selected for the preliminary squad were not on our list, but we are not going to introduce them here because they have no history with the national team and they're not part of this tournament. So we'll just deal with the ones who were on our list. In terms of games, actually, we did part 1 after the 2 World Cup qualifiers in November. So that was part of the basis for our predictions of the starters. We have 2 pre-tournament friendlies to talk about when we get to that part. So we'll talk about that when we get to the spotlight review and our prediction of the starters. Let us move to the list that we created in part 1. So we had manager Juan Mika, and he has not been removed or anything like that, so we consider him a selection, if you will. So Juan Mika will be leading them through the cup. For the goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Jesus Owono and 3 possible candidates in Manuel Sapunga, Heitor Mbella, and Marcos Ondo. And then we also put on the list a couple of players who seem to be off the team, Philippe Ovono and Marlano Mba. Now, in part 1, we did give some biographical information, and we gave the reasons why we put them in the categories that we did according to likelihood. And so we won't be doing that here, but we do urge you to go back and click on the link if you want to find out why we placed the players where we did. Anyway, our definite candidate, Jesus Owono, selected for the final squad, as were the first 2 candidates we had as possible, Manuel Sapunga and Heitor Mbella. The third possible candidate there, Marcos Ondo, made the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. And actually, one of the players seemingly off the squad made the preliminary squad. That was Mariano Mba. He last appeared in the 2021 African Cup. He was actually selected as a backup keeper there. But only made the preliminary squad here, didn't make the final cut. Okay, we move on to defenders and central defenders. We didn't have any definite candidates here, but we had Esteban Orozco and Saul Coco and Jose Elo, all of those likely candidates. And then we had two possible candidates in Marvin Anibo, or Aniebo, and Luis Enrique Sue. And we did have some players seemingly off the squad, but we didn't put them on the list. And it's a good thing we didn't, because they weren't selected at all. So let's go back to the top. Our three likely players were selected. So Esteban Orozco, sometimes called Esteban Obiang, Saul Coco, and Jose Elo, all selected. And among the possible candidates, just the first one, Marvin Aniebo, was selected. Luis Enrique Sue not even selected for the preliminary squad, which is a bit odd. He wasn't on the injury list for the source that I used, but he just missed the last two matches. So given it was such a large preliminary squad, it's a bit odd that he wasn't selected. And perhaps he is injured. I kind of suspect so. Anyway, let's move over to left backs, where we have a definite candidate, Basilio Ndong, and likely candidate, Cosme Anvini, and Luis Messager as a possible but unlikely candidate. Basilio Ndong, the definite candidate, did get selected. However, in a bit of a surprise, Cosme Anvini not selected. We had him as a likely candidate there, and Luis Messager. Sorry, I should have said Cosme Anvini was selected for the preliminary squad, didn't make the final cut, and the same is true of Luis Messager there. So just Basilio Ndong making it to the final squad. They just bring one left back, so I imagine cover would come maybe from the right side. I actually have forgotten to introduce a new candidate at the central defense level, so I'm just going to pop back there and do that. It's Hugo Bula, or Hugo Baila, and he's a central defender. He's actually is just 18 years old and plays for Atalanta in Italy, but is currently on loan to Sampdoria in Italy. So played for Zaragoza in Spain before that, and actually was born in Spain. Had been new to the squad, so hadn't appeared for the squad prior to the naming of the preliminary squad, but did sub into the warm-up game before the tournament. So Hugo Bula, probably not going to be a starter there, but a good addition to the squad and a good club affiliation. Okay, let's move on to right backs, where actually that's why I missed it, because I had accidentally put him as a right back, as I was about to say that the cover was going to come from the right backs, the cover, because they just have a single left back, and it probably will here too. We had a likely right back in Carlos Acapo, and then a possible candidate in Nestor Senra, and we did put on the list Miguel Angel Meye as a possible but unlikely candidate. Carlos Agakpo did make the squad. Acapo, and Nestor Senra also selected for the squad. So maybe one of those can cover the left back position if the main candidate is injured. Meanwhile, Miguel Angel Meye made the preliminary squad, but not the final squad there. Okay, that is the defense. Let's move on to the midfield, and we begin with we don't. We begin with defensive midfielders. We only had one candidate at the portable level here, and that was Javier Mum. And Javier Mum was selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. So already we moved to central midfield, but we do have quite a few candidates here. Three at the likely level, Pablo Ganet, Yannick Boulia, and Alex Balboa. And then we had two possible candidates, Jose Machin, sometimes known by his nickname Pepin, and Pedro Obiang. We also had a possible but unlikely candidate who I'll talk about. We hadn't put him on the list, but I'll deal with that once we look at these candidates. So all three likely candidates were selected: Pablo Ganet, Yannick Boulia, and Alex Balboa, and also Jose Machin or Pepin also was selected. Pedro Obiang is our only player listed as injured. And we did mention it in part one. He was out for the last two games with a hamstring muscle injury. I think those are two different things, maybe one thing. Anyway, I don't know. Injuries have defined for Pedro Obiang's international career. He missed the 2021 African Cup due to injury, and now he misses this cup. So I don't know if it's a hamstring injury or a muscle injury, or whether hamstring muscle injury kind of covers both of those. Anyway, hamstring muscle injury for Pedro Obiang. He actually did make the preliminary squad. Perhaps they were hoping he would recover in time, but he did not. And we had a possible but unlikely candidate that we didn't put on the list. It's Gail Akogo, and we didn't put him on the list because he had joined the team in November 2023 and was on the bench, or actually returned from an absence in November 2023, subbed in for one, on the bench for two, and then not selected for five, including the last 4 matches. So we hadn't put him on the list. He's just 20 years old, so we may see him in the future, but only reached the he only reached the preliminary squad here, and not making the final cut. Okay, let's move on to left midfielders. We do have one player coded as a left midfielder. It's Federico Bicoro, but we moved him to attacking midfielder, so we'll talk about him there. Right midfielders, though, we do have 2 players coded, and one is a I think we did it wrong in part one. Actually, we put them as left midfielders, but they're actually right midfielders. And the first one is Federico Nsue, or Federico Nguema. He seems to be listed by both names. And the other one is Joanette, or Joanette Lopez. And both of those were possible candidates for us here. Federico Nsue was selected for the squad. But Joanette was not selected even for the preliminary squad. Again, makes me wonder if there's an injury or something going on there, because with such a big preliminary squad, it's surprising that he wasn't selected. Anyway, Joanette, we won't see him at the cup. Let's move on to the left wingers, left attacking midfielders, the upper left quadrant of the field players. And we begin with a definite candidate in José Miranda, and a likely candidate in Charles Ondo. And both of those players were selected for the final squad. Over to the right side, we have Iban Salvador. He's coded as a secondary striker, but has been playing on the right wing consistently, so we put him over there. And he was a definite candidate. And then we had, I don't know why we put Ruben Balima, who seems to be off the squad. Perhaps we thought he had a sliver of a chance of coming back. He did not. Let's first of all say that Ivan Salvador did make the squad. Ruben Balima, though, not even making the preliminary squad. So whatever we were thinking there was just plumb wrong. We had two candidates as general midfielders. That usually means that they haven't played enough games to really know what their position is. We had Rafa Nsogo as a possible candidate, and the other one also possible, Mansueto Nguema. And Mansueto Nguema at least made the preliminary squad there, but Rafa and Sogo, not even that much. So anyway, neither of those selected for the final squad. We move on to forwards, and we do have a new candidate here, so we'll add him to the list. New candidate who was selected for the final squad, Jose Nabil Ondo. I'll talk about him soon, but let's look at the candidates first. Oops, I put him in the wrong spot there. And he is an attacking midfielder. That is what we're doing now. So attacking midfielders, Federico Bicoro, actually a left midfielder who we moved, and he's a definite candidate along with Santiago Eneme. And we also had one possible candidate in Jesus Mansogo here. So the first two candidates, the definite candidates, Federico Bicoro was selected, and Santiago Eneme was selected too, as we expected. And the possible candidate, Jesus Mansogo, not even named to the preliminary squad there. So the 22-year-old will have to wait until next time around, it seems. Let's look at the new candidate, Jose Nabil Ondo. So he is just 18 years old and plays in Equatorial Guinea. So we don't even know his position. I put him as an attacking midfielder because my source just says he's in the attack, and he never appeared for the national team before being named to the preliminary squad. So yes, we don't know much about him. Undoubtedly, he'll be a substitute, and it'll probably be lucky if he gets on the field there. Okay, that is the attacking midfielders. Secondary strikers, we moved Ivan Salvador over to the right wing and have dealt with him. So we move on to forwards. We also have, well, not so much a new candidate because he was, we did have him in the files, but we didn't introduce him, and I'll tell you why when we get there. But we'll call him a new candidate here, Solomon Obama. But let's look at the candidates we did have. We had as a definite candidate Emilio Insue, and then a likely candidate in Dorian Jr., and then three possible candidates, Oscar Siafa, Luis Nlavo, and No Ila. And we also had a player seemingly off the squad who we didn't introduce, who was actually selected for the preliminary squad. So we'll mention that when we get there. Let's go back to the top and look at our definite candidate. Emilio Insue, not only selected, but is the captain of the team. Dorian Jr., one of the surprises here, was not selected for the final squad, just for the preliminary squad there. We had him as a likely candidate, and he was a starter in the previous African Cup, so a surprise there. However, the three possible candidates all were selected. So Oscar Siafa, Luis Nlavo, and No Ella, all selected. And also selected, at least for the preliminary squad, was a player we had as seemingly off the squad, and that was because Pedro Oba last played for the team in September 2022. So we didn't put him on the list for that reason. He actually was selected for the previous African Cup just as a substitute. But again, September 2022, the last time Pedro Oba played, but selected for the preliminary squad there. Okay, the new candidate is Solomon Obama, and he was a candidate for the African Cup in 2021. Actually, it was kind of unlucky that he didn't get it, because he had played the first 6 of their 8 games in 2021 and just wasn't selected for the last 2 matches. So I think we had him as a likely candidate back then, but he wasn't selected for that squad. This time he had no involvement before the Cup, last appearing in September 2022, and lo and behold, he not only makes the preliminary squad but the final squad also. So a bit of karma there. He deserved it in 2021 and he gets it in 2023. So Solomon Obama, currently playing in Andorra, actually, for Santa Coloma. Kind of an interesting team to be playing with. He was with Atletico Madrid's B team and youth team in the past, so has come down in his club affiliation, but I'm glad to see him making the team. Okay, that is it. We are completed our business, and we move on to the spotlight review. So I'll tell you here that we made our guesses in a short video. That's where we kind of did this, to put out a short video. And our intent in this mediacast was to reuse, or to use, the pre-tournament friendlies to revise the list to see if there were any changes that we wanted to make. However, they had 2 friendlies planned. The first one with Cameroon was cancelled, and then the second one with Djibouti had no information. I couldn't find any information on who played in it. I just got a suggestion that against Djibouti they used some of the less experienced players, so it may have been an experimental game, kind of giving time to the lesser players, but I'm not sure. What I'm guessing is that we may have seen their first team squad in the game against Cameroon, but as I said, that was cancelled. So because we have no information really to revise our list, we'll just repeat the information that we gave in the short video here. And we had manager Juan Mika. We thought that there wouldn't be any problem with him. Our starting goalkeeper, we think, is Jesus Owono, and central defenders Esteban Orozco and Saul Coco. For the left back position, Basilio Ndong. But for the right back position, we didn't put anyone because we couldn't. We didn't see anyone as a strong enough candidate. Otherwise, this is pretty well laid out compared to most teams. Most of the candidates seem pretty surefire. So moving on to central midfield, we only see one candidate who's a definite there. It's Pablo Ganet. So probably he and someone else. On the left wing, we're confident it's Josep Miranda starting there, and on the right wing, almost certainly Iban Salvador. We also have a central attacking midfield. He may start in that position or somewhere else, kind of in the attack, but Federico Bicoro, we think, is a definite starter. And finally, the forward Emilio Nsue. So compared to most teams, that seemed pretty straightforward. But again, when we watch the first game, we're always thinking that we're always wary that there will be some changes. Anyway, that is it for Equatorial Guinea. So it brings us to the end of part 2, our 2-part look at the team. And we hope familiarizing yourself with the teams and players through our series helps you to enjoy the African Cup that much more. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this media cast.